I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Do you remember every conversation you had today, what you said and what that other person said back to you? It's not that easy to remember in great detail, is it? And that's one reason that Portland police officers say a test run using body cameras was very successful. It's our big story tonight. Portland Police is the only big city police department in the country without body cameras. The city is moving in that direction, but it might still be 10 months or so until everybody is actually using them and wearing them. Last week, the city ended its 60-day pilot program. Officers from Central Precinct and the Focused Intervention Team were the test group there. They started wearing the cameras back on August 21st. Portland Police did not release any video from the pilot program, but Sergeant Kevin Allen, a police spokesman, said he heard good reviews from officers.
I have heard anecdotally that there have been situations where people have expressed concern about an officer's actions. Maybe they've made a complaint and they've been able to go back and pull the video and see what really took place. And that really resolved that much sooner than it otherwise might have. So it really does allow to improve that sense of transparency and accountability on officers. I think the officers like that. They like that there is an unbiased view of what took place.
Body cameras are being used routinely now around the country and here in Oregon and Southwest Washington by a number of different police agencies. The cameras take the public to the front lines, including things like this terrifying police shooting in Longview on September 2nd. And this shooting along Interstate 5 back in April. The body cameras do provide an unbiased view of what did and did not happen. In Portland, I'm told that some of the rules may need to be modified just a little bit. For example, each officer is required to announce that they're recording when they show up and start recording, even if there are already other officers who are there also recording. So Aaron Schmautz, the police union president, said that can create problems. In fact, at one incident when they were dealing with a suicidal person, the person became upset as officers continued to arrive at the scene and each of them announced that they were recording as they're supposed to. Another rule requires officers to start recording as soon as they get a call. Well, Schmautz said that sometimes that results in like 15 minutes of video showing a hand on the wheel as the officer is driving to the scene. But he said overall, officers do like having those cameras.
The officers overwhelmingly have said just, as they've navigated writing reports or other things, having that tool available has been just huge for them. Remembering what someone says to you, you're, note taking, you don't have to be so diligent about writing stuff down on a notebook. You can keep your hands free and watching people and interacting in a more human way. I've got a lot of good reports on those things.
The city of Portland and the police union had been at an impasse over those cameras, but not anymore. The sticking point was whether officers who used deadly force could review the video before writing up a report or giving a statement on it. The union wanted that. The city did not. The compromise involves officers giving a full statement to Internal Affairs within 48 hours of the incident, and then both sides can take a break and go watch the video and then get back together and talk some more. Officers cannot be disciplined for any differences in what they say and what's on the video unless the city can show that they were being dishonest. Officers will be allowed to view the video before writing reports for minor cases. But the rollout for the body cameras for the entire department may not happen until late next summer. That's because results from a pilot program will be reviewed, and then the policies, as it just mentioned, may need to be adjusted. City Council will then need to approve the contract with the body cam company Axon. PPB says all of that is set to happen over the next 10 months. Additional officers also will be trained on the body cameras during that time. Some new information for you tonight regarding Measure 113. Oregon Supreme Court will hear arguments over whether lawmakers can be kept from running for re-election if they boycott the legislature during the session. Now, that measure, which voters overwhelmingly passed, is meant to keep either party from stopping the legislature's work. And if they did, well, they'd be punished. They could not run for re-election after their term was up. 10 Republicans did that very thing this year, skipping 10 or more days in the state Senate, which kept lawmakers from doing anything since they didn't have a quorum. But 5 of those lawmakers have now sued, saying the language within Measure 113 does allow them to run in the next election, but not the election after that one. Well, the state Supreme Court will hear arguments on the case December 14th in Salem. You can bet that we will be watching. Now, let's check in on the data about downtown Portland and how it's recovering or not recovering from the effects of the pandemic. Two different groups have been studying downtown Portland's foot traffic and how it compares before and after. A national study showed Portland was really not doing very well, but a local study was a little more rosy for the Rose City. Now, the national study shows downtown Portland is actually doing quite a bit better than they initially thought, but still not great when you compare to other cities. The folks doing the studies are from the University of California at Berkeley and the University of Toronto. When the study first came out last year, Portland was near the bottom. Researchers looked at 62 cities. Portland was number 60 in terms of recovering foot traffic. Not good. They said Portland had only 41% of its pre-pandemic activity. This past August, though, when the study was updated, Portland seemed to be doing even worse. It had fallen to number 61. Pretty much the bottom, and the activity level fell to 37%. But that was confusing because a local study from the Portland Metro Chamber showed that downtown Portland had actually had about 70% of the foot traffic that it had before the pandemic. So, I mean, come on, who are we going to believe? Turns out that Toronto study was looking at only a narrow part of downtown. Their area of study left out Old Town, which is kind of big, along with some other areas that attract a lot of people like Powell's Books, the theaters, concert halls, and the Cultural District, and Portland State University, also really big. Now they've expanded that area that they've studied to include more of what we consider to be Portland's downtown, and our numbers have improved. The study shows that downtown Portland is seeing about a 61% of the foot traffic that it had before the pandemic. It's much closer to what the Portland Metro Chamber is reporting, still not back to 100%, of course. We've also been bumped up the list, but, you know, not by much. We went from second to last to fifth to last. Yay! But we are apparently doing better than Seattle, which fell to number 63 when the study was revised and a few more cities were added. Sorry, Seattle. We talked to the author of the study, Karen Chappell. She says Portland still needs to rethink the way that it uses downtown and steer away from trying to bring people back to the office.
And the fact that we have Portland now at what, 61%? That's not great. I mean, it's not desperate, but that and it's still, you know, in the bottom 10 or so, and it's you know, there's clearly something that needs to shift. And in Portland, it's some of it is like lack of diversity in the economy and you know, over reliance on tech and long commutes and you know, a variety of things that have you know, encouraged people to stay home. And it's also a tight labor market. It's hard to get talent, and so that sort of the workers can pick and choose, and they don't really want to go back to downtown every day. So that, you know, so there's still just a huge amount of room there to bring activity back to downtown Portland.
All right, so we have room to grow, you're saying. Chappell says the cities that have recovered better are the ones which diversified in the way they use their land, focusing on housing, arts, entertainment, and transit.
I think you do have cities that have done deliberately, you know, tried to support their transit systems, make sure people feel safe on transit, make sure that their transit is accessible, that the fares are low. I mean, the people have done discounts on fares and to get people back on transit. And we see in our analysis, we see a pretty strong correlation. You know, if your downtown's coming back, your transit's coming back, and vice versa.
Meanwhile, a group of more than 24 business owners in downtown Portland are banding together to take on Portland city leaders, along with Multnomah County commissioners and Metro. Now, according to the Portland Business Journal, they're demanding the leaders do more to fix downtown. They sent a letter last week signed by the owners or operators of 25 different businesses. They represent places like the Ace Hotel, Central Office, Crafty Wonderland, and the Multnomah Whiskey Library. They're complaining about public safety problems downtown, writing, "This perceived lack of security significantly hampers our local businesses, discouraging potential customers and leading to reduced in-person sales." They also say homelessness, drug use, and vandalism are significant problems, along with litter, bodily waste, graffiti, and downtown spaces that have been abandoned or neglected. And that's what we've heard from you viewers of why you don't like to go down there if you don't. But they didn't just send a list of complaints, they offered a list of solutions that they think will help. They want to see direct financial support in the form of grants, low-interest loans, and tax incentives for downtown businesses. They also want business incubators. Those are places that would provide support and resources to new businesses. Also marketing and promotion for downtown, and help for businesses with establishing their online presence. In addition to that, they'd like facade improvement programs to help businesses, spruce up their space and make downtown look nicer overall. That'd be cool. They also want leaders to offer more free parking times and better security in parking garages. They want the city to host arts and cultural events downtown as well. Now, the Portland Bureau of Transportation has agreed to increase security at the parking garages, and Portland City Council passed a couple of tax incentives for businesses in the past few months. We'll keep following any other efforts to revive downtown and let you know what else is planned. In the meantime, what about you? What do you think downtown Portland needs in order to recover? Send us your solutions, will you? Our email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, our next installment showcasing part of KGW's new investigative documentary, Sick Medicine. How a doctor who was found negligent in the deaths of 2 patients is still practicing today, and what we know about his time here in Oregon when The Story returns. We continue our exclusive KGW investigation into doctors who are disciplined for serious misconduct, but then allowed to keep practicing. Ashley Korslund has a new KGW documentary on the subject. One of the cases researched involves a doctor who was found negligent in the deaths of 2 patients, but is still practicing today. Ashley?
Yeah, so his name, Pat, is Dr. Banu Sharma, and he was first disciplined in Oregon and then in Illinois, but neither state revoked his medical license. So he just moved from state to state. He is now practicing treating patients in Indiana, where he is under a new investigation there after 3 new complaints were filed.
How can you kill somebody and then go practice still? The pain is still raw for Sonia Rivera, 13 years after her mother's death.
And that's me and my mom.
In 2012, Dr. Banu Sharma approved Pauletta Cameron for liposuction at a Sono Bello clinic in Portland. Pauletta had a medical history that made her a poor candidate for surgery. But according to court records, Dr. Sharma didn't order any preoperative diagnostic testing, like an electrocardiogram. We asked Dr. Juliana Hansen, the chief of plastic and reconstructive surgery at OHSU, to review Pauletta's case file.
She did not have normal signs even before surgery was started. Before the surgery was started, her oxygenation levels were documented to have an oxygen saturation of 80%. That is extremely low.
According to court records, a nurse notified Dr. Sharma twice about Pauletta's vitals, but after the surgery, he released her to go home. Hours later, Pauletta collapsed and was rushed by ambulance to a hospital. She was in a coma for 3 days before being taken off life support.
And she gets it flatlined on the screen, and that was it. It was like my whole world was gone.
An autopsy listed a traumatic bowel injury as her cause of death. A $13 million lawsuit filed on behalf of the family accused Dr. Sharma of perforating Pauletta's bowel during the surgery.
That's an error, a technical error, and in this case we think led to some very severe problems.
The Oregon Medical Board investigated and found Dr. Sharma negligent in Pauletta's care. While looking into Pauletta's case, records show investigators then discovered 5 additional patients in Oregon who needed emergency medical care after cosmetic procedures with Dr. Sharma. The board revoked his license, then changed course for reasons it won't disclose. Instead, it placed conditions on his license, like imposing a fine and requiring him to complete continuing education. Dr. Sharma left Oregon and went on to practice in Illinois, where in 2016, a second patient died after a cosmetic surgery. The medical board in Illinois found him grossly negligent and declared him an immediate danger to the health and safety of the public. Investigators also discovered 3 additional patients in Illinois who had to receive emergency medical care following their procedures with Dr. Sharma. Still, the board chose not to revoke his license and instead suspended him for 18 months. Dr. Sharma left Illinois and is now actively practicing in Indiana, where he also holds a medical license. And we discovered that Indiana has opened an investigation following 3 new complaints.
Why is he slipping through the cracks?
It's tough for Pauletta Cameron's daughter Sonia to comprehend.
Why isn't somebody doing something? Why is the medical board not seeing that this is happening? Why isn't anybody going after him for what he's done?
Well, this just keeps getting more fascinating all the time. Where does the Indiana investigation stand right now?
So this is still pending. This investigation is pending. And what's really troubling, Pat, is that the 3 complaints against Dr. Sharma in that state, they were filed in 2021. And it took until this past spring, so almost 2 years later, for there to be any indication on the state website about these investigations. And here we are. There's still no resolution. And Dr. Sharma, as we found, is still treating patients.
And you actually talked to the doctor?
I did. So we reached out to him, gave him an opportunity to comment, and he did respond to me. He asked to speak with me. We set up a time to talk on the phone. And as soon as I essentially started telling him about our story and what questions I'd want to ask, he said he didn't want to talk to me, and he ended our call.
He'd had enough.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And where can people go to watch the entire documentary?
Yep, so it's called Sick Medicine. It's available right now on all of KGW's digital platforms, so KGW Plus and YouTube. And then the broadcast premiere will be this Friday night at 7 o'clock right here on KGW.
Okay, Ashley Korslund, really great work. Thanks a lot. Still ahead on the story, what's the latest on the Greater Idaho movement? While many of you scoff at the mention of the name, the campaign took a big step forward last week, holding the first ever meeting between lawmakers from Oregon and Idaho. We'll explain what they need to happen next and hear why the Oregon lawmaker even went in the first place. That's when the story returns. Well, it's been a while since we've checked in on the Greater Idaho movement. For those of you unaware, their goal is to literally move the Oregon border to the west to create one big Idaho. The thought behind it is that many in eastern Oregon feel ignored by lawmakers in Salem and generally the west side. And they are thinking it would be better if they aligned with Idaho's conservative legislature. Now, before we get too far into this, let's briefly discuss the prospect of this actually happening. I'm going to keep it short for you. Ain't ever going to happen. Sorry. Both Oregon and Idaho legislatures would have to agree, and then Congress would have to sign off. So even calling this a long shot, it's really generous. But it does illustrate the deep divide between the urban western half of Oregon and the mostly rural eastern part. Now, last week, the first ever meeting between legislators from the two states happened out in Baker City. You see it right here. From Oregon, you have Prineville Republican Rep. Vicki Breeze Iverson there on the left, and the two women on the right side of the table are Republican Representatives Judy Boyle and Barbara Ehart of Idaho. Up until this point, the Greater Idaho campaign has focused on putting voter initiatives on the ballot in eastern Oregon counties. Those ballot measures ask voters if they want their elected leaders to start having conversations about moving the border. There's nothing binding. It's just to get the discussions underway and show how voters are feeling. Well, voters in 12 eastern Oregon counties have felt that, yeah, they would like that. A majority of voters approved it. Those are the counties there that we're showing you in red on the map. Crook County in green will put the measure to voters in May of next year. And while the Greater Idaho campaign boasts of its undefeated record in those counties, the next step, getting the state legislatures involved, that's not so easy, and it's not been so smooth. In Idaho, earlier this year, a bill calling for discussion of moving the border actually passed in the House of Representatives, but the Idaho Senate did not pass it. And one of the lawmakers at that meeting last week said, well, that was because of turnover in the Senate and because of news that the Oregon legislature would not touch it. And by the way, that was correct. A bill was introduced into Salem this year by Republican Senator Dennis Linthicum of Klamath Falls, but it was referred to a Senate committee where it never even received a hearing and it died. So that's the big hurdle ahead for Greater Idaho, getting the Oregon legislature on board. And getting Representative Breeze Iverson out to Baker City was the first step towards making that happen.
In Oregon, I represent the center of Oregon, rural community, and surrounding me, there's been 12 counties that have voted to take this conversation forward. I've clearly heard from my constituents, and I am here today because they've asked me to have this conversation. And I am very pleased to be here with a representative from Idaho who has also heard from her constituents that they'd like us to have this conversation. We just need to listen to the people that brought us to this elected position.
Now, she was asked how other Republicans in the Oregon legislature feel about Greater Idaho, to which she answered with a beautiful pivot and said, well, they've seen headlines and they've had discussions. But how does Oregon's majority party, the Democrats, feel about Greater Idaho? We got in touch with the press folks from the Senate side, and they told us, no comment. So far, we have yet to receive a response from the Democrats in the House side. So whether this is a political hot potato or simply a non-starter, which is more my bet, for the D's, time will tell. But Greater Idaho has a long way to go, especially in Salem. Well, we hope you enjoy our Digging for Old segments every Monday here on The Story. If you missed it last night, you can watch it now on the KGW YouTube channel. But cool historical finds are not always just in museums like the Oregon Historical Society. They can be found in places you would least expect, maybe even your home. A viewer sent us these pictures late last week. She found an old newspaper behind a wall in her home when she was getting some extensive water damage repaired in southeast Portland. Her house was built in 1940, and the newspaper is the Oregon Journal from December 11th, 1940. It's not in the best shape, but that's expected after being jammed behind a wall for more than 80 years. There are all kinds of ads about rooms to rent and houses for sale, as well as one advertising Old Hermitage brand Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, a quart for just $2.10. Hey, thanks for sending us the photo, and if you ever make a discovery like this, let us know. We'd love to share it. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. The good stuff's coming up next. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30. In the meantime, we're going to leave you from a very snowy Timberline Lodge where it looks like the ski season is getting its first packings. A lot of my skiing buddies and snowboarder friends are saying, yeah, bring it on.